And there we go. We are live on the MLB Talk 101. What's up, guys? Brian Danoff here, joined alongside Gershon Rabinowitz, as we have a very special guest joining us tonight, a former Major League catcher for 14 seasons and now a broadcaster with the Yes Network. John Flaherty, better known as Flash in the baseball community, is with us now. And Flash, first off, thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk some baseball with us. How are you doing, and how anxious are you to leave the snowy Northeast and get down for some sunshine down in Florida?
Well, guys, first of all, thanks for having me. And anytime you can talk baseball when it's actually snowing outside of my house right now, I'm ready. I'm ready to get out of here. The month of February is always the toughest for me, being an ex-player. You're just looking forward to getting down to spring training, and luckily for me, I'll be down there at the beginning of March to broadcast a few games. So it's just great being with you, talk a little baseball on a Sunday night, and it's all good.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's the final Sunday before the season gets going because most teams, pitchers, and catchers report during this week. So it's great that baseball's finally back. So, you know, getting going with the interview now. You know, you were born in New York City, attended George Washington University, and ironically enough, you were drafted by the Red Sox in the 25th round of the 1988 MLB draft. So what made you? What team did you grow up rooting for, and when did you decide that you wanted to make baseball a career?
You know what, Brian? I didn't have a favorite team growing up, believe it or not. I was a Thurman Munson fan. I loved watching him play, but I wasn't a big Yankee fan. My brother was a Met fan, but I was the type of kid that would be out in the backyard playing baseball. I wasn't necessarily watching it all the time. And I thought going to college, and you mentioned GW, you know, they gave me a scholarship to go down there and play. I thought that was going to be as far as my baseball career went. And luckily for me, it just kind of continued, and I kept moving on. The Red Sox gave me an opportunity to sign professionally. But I think when I was in college, I started realizing I had a chance playing against some of the better players in the country. But for me, I didn't have that fan part of it. It was more I just enjoyed playing the game, and it ended up working out for a nice career.
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, after your days in Boston, you moved on to the Tigers and then, of course, later to the Yankees, as I'm sure many of our viewers know you from the Yes Network, of course. You know, and you ended up playing in three of the most historic ballparks in baseball history, you know, Fenway Park, Tiger Stadium, and Yankee Stadium. So, you know, how privileged did you feel that you were able to play in those parks?
You know what, Brian? It was great, obviously. I mean, you know, my first day in the major leagues was at the old Yankee Stadium playing for the Red Sox against the New York Yankees opening day in 1992.
Oh, wow.
You know, and growing up here in Rockland County, that was an unbelievable experience. And then, you know, first home game in Boston, Fenway Park, getting to see the Green Monster for the first time was incredible. And you mentioned the old Tiger Stadium and playing for legend Hall of Famer and Sparky Anderson. Those three places were fantastic. But to tell you the truth, my whole career was, you know, kind of the feeling that I wasn't going to be in the big leagues very long. So I had to kind of appreciate every day and keep grinding it out and keep working at it. And, you know, luckily for me, after about 13 and a half years, I was able to walk away from it. But there was never that feeling of relaxing and taking it all in because I felt on edge every day that I needed to stay on top of my game.
And your major league career, Flash, lasted longer than you expected. In 1996, you were with the Detroit Tigers. You were on the losing end of your former teammate and your future teammate, Roger Clemens' second 20 strikeout performance. And you had the third longest hitting streak for a catcher in Major League history. I think Benito Santiago and Sandy Alomar are the only ones that had a hitting streak longer than 27 games. What kind of pressure were you under at that time, and were you surprised about the amount of attention that you were getting for the hit streak?
Well, you know what? To tell you the truth, the hitting streak was a ton of fun. I mean, I got traded from Detroit. We were a last place club. Get traded to San Diego, and you know we're a first place team, and all of a sudden I'm on this hitting streak, and you know you guys know my career better than anybody. I was a defensive guy. I could catch and throw, but hitting was kind of my weakness. And all of a sudden I got hot, and you know Merv Retman was a hitting instructor out there. He kind of had me move my hands a little bit more, and it gave me a little rhythm. And all of a sudden the game slowed down for me, and I had a great month, you know, playing baseball. But I really low-keyed the whole thing, and I kind of just had a lot of fun with it. I was more excited to be on a winning team. And, you know, to tell you the truth, when Tony Gwynn came up to me after 25 games and he said, well, you just beat my longest hitting streak, that's when I knew it's over. I mean, I shouldn't be even be talking to Tony Gwynn about hitting, and I
Right.
just hitting streak. So I think it ended up a couple of days later. And actually, guys, another Yes Network announcer, Al Leiter, was the one who broke up that hitting streak. So I kind of, I lost my hitting streak to a brand name, and Al Leiter.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, not great to hear, but funny how that ended up. That you guys work together now. So and of course, as you said prior to the start of the streak, you're with the Tigers. They traded you to San Diego for Brad Ausmus. Now, of course,
Yeah.
played a few great years in Detroit. Now the manager of the Tigers. So have you talked to him since he got the gig? And I mean, isn't kind of interesting to you how you have that connection that you were involved with him going to the Tigers and becoming such a fan favorite there?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. The guys that I played with, and Brad, playing against him in the minor leagues and then in the big leagues, being traded for him. Now he's a manager. Eric Wedge came up with him through the minor leagues with Boston, and he obviously managed the Indians and the Mariners. My contemporaries now are getting these big league opportunities. To answer your question, Brian, I have not talked to Brad. He's out on the West Coast. He's a San Diego guy. I'm looking forward to working some of the games and getting to see him again. And he's going to do a great job. I mean, he was always a very, very prepared catcher. He's got the personality for that job, and obviously he's inheriting a very good team. So I expect a lot of good things out of Detroit this year.
And before the '98 season, Flash, you were traded to the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. The Devil Rays were an expansion team at the time. They had their fair share of moments when you were there, highs and lows.
Yeah.
He pitched his first major league start, won at Yankee Stadium. I believe you were catching that night. Rolando Rojo, I think, was on the mound that night. Tony Saunders blew out his arm in Texas, a very disturbing display seeing that. Wade Boggs against Cleveland, getting his 3,000th hit, home run, and kissing home plate. Joe Williams and Pedro Martinez in that brawl that was played a number of times on SportsCenter. Explain to us the transition from going from an established team like the San Diego Padres, like you mentioned earlier, to an expansion team that's starting off from scratch in Tampa Bay, in the American Leagues. And what other thoughts do you have about your time in Tampa Bay?
Well, I have a lot of positive memories of Tampa Bay, and the positive memories aren't necessarily of on the field because we had a lot of tough years there. Expansion baseball. We lost a lot of games. You mentioned a lot of the highlights, but there are a lot of lean times too. But the one thing that I will always be grateful to Kevin Towers, who was the general manager of San Diego at the time. He traded me to Tampa Bay knowing that I was building a house there. So I moved to Tampa Bay into a new house. My daughter was already born. My two sons were born in Tampa. So from a family standpoint, we had a house. The off season, the regular season, and spring training were all there. We were able to live as a baseball family in one house for the entire year and didn't have to move. Those are things that, as a baseball, husband and a father, I wouldn't trade those years in for anything because my family had a sense of stability. Their dad just went to work at night, going over to Tropicana Field and playing baseball. But we had a very, very normal, regular routine, and the 5 years in Tampa were great. So I have positive memories for everything, except, we would lose a lot of games. We went through a lot of struggles there. So, that wasn't the best part. But I think at that point in my career, it was probably a great 5 years for me to spend down there in Tampa family-wise.
Yeah, that was very similar when Tino Martinez went from St. Louis to Tampa Bay. He was very uncomfortable with the Cardinals. The fans were not very receptive to him replacing Mark McGwire. He goes home to Tampa, has a great season in 2004, then comes to the Yankees in 2005, has an incredible streak in May, I remember, and then he just rides off into the sunset. Now, speaking of your final couple of years in the major leagues, when you ran off into the sunset or to the S Network, in your final 3 major league seasons, you returned home to the Yankees, well, home as in New York, to the Yankees. You were a non-roster invitee. I think Chris Widger was the backup catcher in 2002. Yep. You were battling him to back up Jorge Posada. You ended up winning the job. Were there from 2003 to 2005. However, during the postseason each year, the team suffered a demoralizing loss. The 6-game series in Florida was, I think, one of the toughest. I mentioned Brian before that I feel that was the best Yankee team that Joe Torre ever did not win a World Series. I thought that you guys had everything in place that year. 2004, I mean, there's no mentioning of 0-3 up in that series, and then the Red Sox come back. And then in 2005, guys were down 2-1. Sean Chacon pitches a great game, I believe, on a Saturday night. You have to make the flight from hell, cross-country flight, no day off. Mike Messina's on the mound, and then Bubba Crosby collides with Gary Sheffield in the outfield. And it was just three demoralizing losses. And how does a player recover from those type of losses in the postseason and, just tries to get over it? Because I know that some players have difficulty getting over it. Donnie Moore was one guy, committed suicide. And just others just have difficulty, and they're just not able to get back to the point they were in their major league careers.
Well, you know what? I think the one thing playing against the Yankees all those years that they were winning World Series, they made it look easy, that getting to the postseason was easy, winning the World Series was easy. And the one thing that I learned my first year, excuse me, in 03 with the Yankees, it's not easy going through 162 games and making it to the postseason. So I think every year that I was there, I appreciated kind of the grind and how tough it is to get the postseason play. Looking back on that World Series in 03, we should have won that series. The ALCS against the Red Sox with Booney hitting the home run.
Yeah.
That took so much emotion out of us that we were kind of flat going into the World Series. But, even with that, we had a 2-1 lead, and it didn't work out. But that didn't bother me that much because I just assumed we would get back there the next year in 04. And obviously being up 3-0 against the Red Sox, you felt like that was going to be, another trip to the World Series, and we all know how that turned out. That was a tough couple of days after that Red Sox series, and you have to give them a lot of credit for what they did. We didn't get the job done and finish it out, but you always had that feeling after it was over that, well, we have next year and we'll be able to get it done. We'll be able to get it done. And unfortunately for me, in my 3 years in New York, we weren't able to get it done. But I wouldn't trade any of those experiences because I learned so much as being in a World Series. I learned so much being in a playoff and being ahead 3-0 and learning that you got to finish out the deal. Those were experiences that, obviously baseball-wise, I tried to get better. Mm-hmm. But I think even in just in life, you learn that, there are going to be a lot of tough days, a lot of tough losses, and you got to pick yourself up and get back out there after it and try to get it done.
Yeah, and when you were with the Yankees, Flash, you played for Joe Torre, getting into the Hall of Fame this year. You played with the Core Four. You played with the aforementioned Tino Martinez. What memories did you have playing for Torre and playing with the Core Four, and how did you change your approach when you became a Yankees broadcaster as opposed to being teammates with them?
Well, the broadcasting part was tough. When I went to the booth that first year in 06, like you mentioned, I played with Posada, I played with Jeter, I played with Mariano. Andy Pettitte, wasn't back yet, but it's tough when you're in the booth and one of your buddies doesn't get the job done, and you have to be critical. But everybody that I've dealt with, they've kind of came up to me after the fact if I was critical, and I always try to remember how tough the game was and maybe give a reason why they're struggling or why they had a tough game that night. And a lot of the players will say that, it's fair criticism. You have to point out, especially in New York, why somebody wasn't getting the job done. But if you can balance it with the fact that there are things going on behind the scenes that might have added to that, I think the players, the players respect that. Joe Torre, playing for him was an absolute pleasure, and I think one of his strengths was he made everybody in that clubhouse feel like they were an important part of that year's team. And, I was very, very, honest with my part on those clubs. I was a backup catcher. You could have argued I was the 25th man on the team. But Joe Torre never made me feel that way. He made me feel like I was an important part. And I feel like I had a couple of pretty good years for him because he made me feel so valuable. And, he would always tell me, he said, I think you're going to be a manager sometime. And whenever you want to talk about some of the decisions that I make as a manager, he was always open to that. And I had some great conversations with him about strategy and how he handled personalities. And when he makes you feel that important, you'll run through a wall for a manager like that. And, getting to the Hall of Fame, obviously, it's going to be a great summer for the Yankees and for him.
Yeah, it will be. His number 6 will be retired, and the last single-digit number left will be just Derek Jeter's number 2, which obviously will be retired as soon as he hangs up the spikes. And when you were with the Yankees, there was one game that stands out. It's a Yankees classic that was just on recently, July 1st, 2004. 13-inning game at Yankee Stadium. Brad Halsey on the mound against Pedro Martinez. It was a game best known for Derek Jeter diving into the stands. You were the last player on Joe Torre's bench in that game because they used up the DH spot. Ruben Sierra had to go to the outfield, and they needed a pinch hitter for Tanyan Sturtz. And you delivered a walk-off single off Curtis Liscanic. Take us through that game, how a backup catcher must prepare to enter cold off the bench, and whether that hit was the highlight of your career.
Well, that hit was not the highlight of my career. That hit was probably the highlight of my Yankee career, the 3 years that I was there. But that game and, every Red Sox series was had so much emotion that, I remember I think we won 3 games in a row against Boston in that series. We were going for a sweep. And you mentioned the kid, Brad Halsey, pitching, a young left-hander going against Pedro Martinez. And we really didn't think that much about that game because we won 3 games already. But the kid did a great job. He hung in there against Pedro. We kind of kept the game tight. Everybody remembers Derek going into the stands, and we had to kind of use the DH or give up the DH. So I saw Sturtzy's point in the lineup coming up, and I knew I was the only guy left on the bench. So I was able to go down to the clubhouse and get some swings off a tee. So you mentioned going in there ice cold. I was actually feeling pretty confident because I was loose. I took about 20 or 30 swings in the clubhouse. And when I got out on the field for my at-bat, I had good numbers against Liscanic when I faced him in the National League, so my confidence was a little bit higher at that point. And to tell you the truth, Don Mattingly made a change in my batting stance that day, and I used it in BP and felt really good with it. And I think when I got that hit, I was hitting about $160. In July. So obviously I was struggling. And when I got into the box against Liscanic, the first pitch he threw me, I thought in my head, I said, wow, I saw that really well. And I knew something was different, and able to get that hit obviously was a big deal. But I thought the rest was as hot as it could be. Different one batting adjustment in my setup from Don Mattingly. So, he's a great manager, obviously, in L.A., but he was a fantastic hitting instructor and changed my 03 or my 04 season, and I got hot the second half. So that one swing and that one at bat kind of propelled me the rest of the way.
Yeah, we always see that Yankee Classic. It's always on Yes Network every year, and it's still great to watch every single time. It's awesome. So after your playing days were over, you became broadcaster for the Yes Network. Not soon after that, signed this picture for myself. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I like it.
Like the hair, right?
A little different, Brian.
Yeah, but explain the transition from playing all these years in baseball, with a player like yourself being drafted out of college, playing baseball. Baseball was kind of all you knew. So when did you decide to kind of take that career path of becoming a broadcaster, and how did you wind up with Yes? Because of course you play with a few teams who have their own baseball networks.
Yeah, well, you know what? I was lucky enough that when I was in New York, I tried to do as much media stuff as I could, being a backup player, and try to get comfortable in front of the camera. But, when I retired in the spring of '06, I went to camp with Boston to try to catch Tim Wakefield. Mm-hmm. And the second day of camp, I knew that I didn't want to be there. You mentioned my whole life was being a baseball player, and I was used to the grind. I was used to all the work that you had to put into it to stay on top of your game. And the second day of spring training, I was taking batting practice with David Ortiz and Trot Nixon. And I remember I had a terrible round of batting practice. And, in the past, I would go work out and go in the cage and try to fix it. And that particular day, I just went back to my apartment, and I called up my wife and I said, things are different. I don't want to work at it anymore. So I knew at that point that I was going to walk away. And to tell you the truth, I did not send out any applications, resumes, any of that stuff for broadcasting. I retired on a Monday, and on Tuesday I had a couple of messages from some networks. A couple of them were in New York. So I hung out with my family in Florida for about another week and just came back home. And I actually did an audition for SNY, the New York Mets. And I did a pre and a post game for a spring training game. And George Steinbrenner saw me on the Mets station working for SNY, and he called up my boss with Yes, John Filippelli, and said, we can't let this guy work for the Mets. We got to find a spot here at Yes. So from that audition, Yes offered me a 30-game package, and the next thing I knew, I had a Yes microphone in my hand, and I was interviewing Derek Jeter on opening day in 2006. So they kind of just threw me into the fire and, gave me an opportunity. And, this is my ninth year on Yes, so it's turned into a very exciting second career for me.
Yeah, and for those that don't hear you outside the New York area, you do some studio work, and you also do some games on the road. You do some games at home in the broadcast booth. Is there any preference that you have, like doing games in the studio or analyzing games when you go to the stadium, or just in general, any preferences?
You know what? I don't have any preferences. I enjoy the game when you're there for 3 hours and you can kind of just talk baseball and break down pitchers and what they're trying to do. But I also love the studio when that red light goes on the camera and it's live, and you get that adrenaline pump that I had when I was a player. It's not quite the same intensity, but you got to be ready. You got to be on top of your game. You got to be prepared. And when that light goes on, it's game time. So I kind of, I like going back and forth with both of them because it changes it up a little bit. It doesn't get stale. It doesn't get boring. But there's nothing better than being at Yankee Stadium working maybe a Yankee Red Sox game. That's, that's the ultimate for broadcasters, when you can get a game like that. You hope you get a good close game towards the end where strategy comes into play, and you can really kind of break it down. Those are the great nights for us in the booth.
Yeah, and John, you mentioned earlier that you started in 2006. You had the audition for SNY, which I had no idea about, which very interesting story. And then you joined Yes, did about 30 games. Then at the end of the 2006 season, Jim Cott retired, and he was paired with Ken Singleton.
Yeah,
he was a former Oriole outfielder, kind of played in the 70s, early 80s, and then Yes started to pair you with him, which I found very interesting. And you got to do some play-by-play, which that was also pretty surprising. And you still do that to this day, and that's on a lot of these West Coast trips, like to Seattle and to Oakland. You'll do some of them. You'll even do some with Bob Lorenz, who's the studio host on the S Network. Which is more terrifying, doing play-by-play or catching Randy Johnson?
Doing play-by-play, definitely. I tell people about catching Randy. Catching Randy was easy. It was dealing with Randy the 4 other days in between the starts that was tough. He had a different personality. But working with Jim Cott for that 1 year was fantastic. He taught me a lot. But Kenny Singleton has been my mentor in this business, and Kenny told me a long time ago that you need to learn how to do some play-by-play. It kind of gives you a little bit more value to a network. And I fought him on it a little bit. I didn't want to do it because when you're an analyst and the play happens, you have a couple of seconds to get your thoughts together on what you want to say and how you want to say it. Play-by-play happens quick. I mean, you got to be on top of your game. You don't want to over-talk about the situation because the fans can see it on TV. But I still don't feel comfortable doing play-by-play. I feel like a fish out of water. And they're probably going to have me do it a little bit more this year than I have in the past, so we'll see how that goes. But I give Kenny Singleton a lot of credit. He kind of made me do the play-by-play. He's really helped me in my broadcasting career. And, I love when we go to the West Coast and it's him and I, and we just get to talk baseball for a couple hours. He's a real pro and a great friend.
Yeah, and I was actually reading a couple of days ago that Jim, when you joined the S Network in 2006, that you had actually a list of notes and a binder and so many things you brought with you on your first broadcast, and Jim Cott basically told you, what the hell are you doing? You bring all these things with you, just talk about baseball, and, so, I mean, I guess so he was a mentor for you.
Yeah.
I mean, and I guess it was terrifying for Bob Lorenz. There was that game where I think it was the first 3D broadcast that the S Network did, and there was a foul ball coming to the stands at Safeco Field, and you caught it barehanded. That was another moment that I was thinking of. That I mean, for Bob, that was probably pretty terrifying. I mean, he never played in the major leagues, doesn't have a glove with him. I mean, he's trying to do play-by-play. I mean, you're mentioning how terrifying it is, and then all of a sudden a foul ball is coming back over the screen, and you just reach out. It's like whoa.
That was the ex-athlete in me kind of came out. You see a ball coming at you, you got to try to make a play, and Bob gives me a hard time that I kind of used my left arm to push him out of the way, which I did a little bit. But I'm impressed. Where did you hear that story about Jim Cott? Because that was my first game that I ever did in the booth, and you're right. I had this whole binder And he told me to kind of throw that thing away, and he said, listen, you and I are watching a baseball game, and it's like we're having a beer in a bar talking about the game.
Right.
And that's how you should broadcast. So I'm impressed that you found that story, because every night I go in the booth, I think of Jim Cott, and I say, you know what, I'm going to be prepared, I'm going to do my homework, but I'm not going to have things in front of me where I feel like I have to force it into a game. Just kind of watch, talk, and if it's important, if you've done your research and it's important to the situation, you'll remember it, and it'll come out in the broadcast. So I thank you all the time. And I was lucky enough to see him last week at the Thurman Munson Awards. So that it was great advice that he gave me.
Yeah, I was actually just, Googling and just searching for just different facts and any anecdotes I could find before we did this interview, just find out more about you. And that one popped up on a previous interview that you did. So, I mean, so I got to give credit to whoever that was. I forgot off the top of my head which website it was. And also, I noticed on broadcast that your colleagues nicknamed you Flash. This is something I noticed that it was not during your playing days, but on the Yes Network, which was surprising since your Yankees teammate Tom Gordon was also called Flash, for obvious reasons,
yeah.
Flash Gordon. How did you end up becoming known as Flash? Where did that come from, that nickname?
Well, that actually came from my first day in professional baseball. I signed with the Red Sox, and I drove here from Rockland County, New York, up to Elmira, New York, to play for the Elmira Pioneers in the New York Penn League. And I actually met a left-handed pitcher from Boston College named John Dolan. And, we kind of introduced ourselves, and he heard my last name, and he said, Flaherty, do you know a guy named Timmy Flaherty? He goes to BC with me. And I said, no, I've never heard of him before. I don't know if we're related or anything. And he said, well, actually, we call him Flash Flaherty, because I guess at Boston College, he would have maybe a few too many beers at the parties, and he decided that it would be a good idea to drop his pants in the middle of these parties. So they started calling him Flash Flaherty. Now, I didn't think anything of it. I said, all right, whatever, that's a nice story. The next day I go to the yard to have our first workout, and he calls me Flash, and I have not gotten rid of it. That was 1988. And now, as you mentioned on the Yes Network, they refer to me as Flash. Pretty much 95% of the players that I ever played with, they know me as Flash. So I owe it all to John Dolan and Timmy Flaherty from Boston College. And actually, Timmy Flaherty turned into be a district attorney up in Boston. So he turned out to be a very successful man up there in the city. And I have his nickname, so I have to thank John Dolan for that.
And I hope some people are watching this, probably after midnight, because that sounds like a story for Yes After Dark, when you guys do like West Coast games or something. I mean, I don't know if that's G-rated for 8:40 Eastern.
Yeah, that's not the PG version. That's the rated R version, and you guys got it. So congratulations.
That's good. That's good to have in this interview, I have to say. So,
all right.
In addition to broadcasting, of course, you're also associated with the Rockland Boulders, the independent team. So I've yet to go up and see a game there. I live a few minutes away from Rockland County, so hopefully this summer. So explain to those who aren't familiar with independent baseball, what are the differences between that and the big leagues, and just explain, what the Boulders are.
Well, Brian, for me, when the whole idea was brought to me about bringing an independent baseball team to Rockland County, it really piqued my interest. First of all, I think that a night at a ball game with your family, and now being the father of 3 kids and 3 teenagers, we don't get that many opportunities to kind of hang out as a family. So I thought that whole idea of having an affordable night at a baseball game with your kids would be great, and it has been. We've been in existence for 3 years. But I think the part that really kind of struck a chord with me was that independent baseball is all about kids who do not have a shot to play, or have not gotten a shot to play minor league baseball and get into the professional ranks. They might be kids who graduated from college and they didn't get drafted, and they want to keep playing, and they want to try to get better, and they want to showcase their talents and try to sign a professional contract. So that whole idea of giving these kids, an avenue to keep playing and keep working and kind of chasing their dream, that stuck with me a little bit. I was a 25th round pick. I was a late draft pick. I wasn't expected to make it, but there were people who believed in me and kept giving me opportunities. So this whole idea of independent baseball, in my mind, is for the kids who just want to keep chasing that dream. And they probably had so many people along the way saying, you're never going to make it, you're not big enough, you're not fast enough. I mean, I've heard all of those, critiques about my game. So the Rockland Boulders are there for, to give these kids another opportunity to play, to keep trying to get better. And, we've signed some kids some of the kids on our teams have gone on to contracts. And for me, it's really rewarding to see them work hard. Have a pro scout from the Braves signed one of our kids. That to me is why I wanted to get involved. It's been very, very rewarding.
Yeah, and I've passed by the ballpark a number of times. It's a beautiful place to catch a game. So we have one last question here, and I'm sure spring training. The Yankees are reporting to Tampa, Florida on this Friday. They're going to introduce Masahiro Tanaka on Tuesday. Pretty exciting week, and baseball's back. It's going to be different, though, of course, without Mariano Rivera and Andy Pettitte. So, one of our followers on Twitter named Ben Bronx asks, 2013 was, of course, a difficult season for the Yankees. Injuries galore, Jeter, Teixeira, Youkilis, all those guys, Granderson. The Yankees decided, of course, to spend all that money and sign McCann, sign Ellsbury, sign Beltran, sign Tanaka. But, of course, they also lost Robinson Cano. We all know the story. So basically, what do you think went wrong for the Yankees in 2013, and what do you really see from this team this season? I'm sure you're going to give your thoughts on Yankees 2014 Pride, Power, and Pinstripes. I can start promoting that now a few weeks before you record it, but we know what goes on the S Network. So what's your expectations for 2014, and looking back at 2013, what do you think? What was the source of all those problems? Was it the injuries, or was it something more than that?
No, I think it was definitely the injuries, and I think the 2013 club, and I think Joe Girardi in particular, they can look back on that year and be pretty proud, because it was amazing that there was maybe a week or 10 days left in the season, and the New York Yankees were still in the conversation about fighting for a playoff hunt.
Right.
With all the injuries they had, with Sabathia going, not having a good year. They should have been buried by the All-Star break, and they found a way to keep it going. Now with all the new additions, there's a lot of excitement, in the Bronx this year, and I think that with all of the guys that the Yankees signed, Tanaka getting all the money and all the hype, he'll be introduced this week. But for me, Brian McCann is the one player that not only is going to be fantastic on the field, but I think his personality behind the plate is going to kind of change what we've seen from the Yankees the last couple of years. He brings an intensity with him where every game is important. I think that was one of the things maybe last year that I was a little disappointed in. Even with all the injuries, it didn't seem like there was that sense of urgency where every game was really important, that he had to find a way to win. Brian McCann is going to bring that edge to with him this year, so I think that's going to be a huge addition. And you know what, guys, like anything else, we'll get to spring training, we'll get a feel for the club. They got to kind of develop their chemistry and their personality. But I think they've done a lot of really good things during the winter to give them a lot of ammunition to go out there and have a good year.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's kind of interesting because we will hear all those predictions, and people are already saying the Yankees won the offseason, but people year after year keep saying, oh, this team won the offseason, they're gonna go all the way, and you play the games on the field, not on paper. As a Yankee fan personally, I am optimistic for the team, but you really, as you said, you don't know what you have until people, everyone reports to camp, and that's finally going to happen, of course, this week. And you finally see the light at the end of the tunnel for the MLB offseason. It's coming to a close, and baseball is going to be back on Friday with the Yankees pitchers and catchers reporting to Tampa. So, John, it was an honor talking to you. It was great talking baseball tonight, and we thank you a lot for your time.
Thanks, John.
Guys, I really enjoyed it. You guys did a great job too, and look forward to spring training right around the corner. So get through the month of February, and then the games will start in March. All right?
Absolutely.
You guys enjoy it.
You too, Flash. Have a good night.
Have a great night.
All right.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. All right. So for the MLB Talk 101, for Gershon Rabinowitz, you can follow Gersh on Twitter at Gersh_MLB Talk. You can follow John Flaherty, of course, at Flash17Yes. And you can also find him, of course, on TV for a ton of Yankee games in the spring and, of course, throughout the regular season, alongside guys like Michael Kay, Ken Singleton, and read up about his career because it really was an interesting one. So, for everyone here at the MLB Talk 101, thanks again to John Flaherty for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Danoff. You can follow me on Twitter at BrianD_MLB Talk, as you've seen below here the whole interview. And, we launched our site last night, www.mlbtalk101.com, and we are excited with all the possibilities for this season that will come to our network. So hope you guys all have a great night. Pitchers and catchers report this week for almost all the teams. Baseball's back, and Gershon, it's great. It's awesome.
Nothing beats it. I mean, February, it's a pretty much, not much goes on right after the Super Bowl. If you're a sports fan, right now all you have is the NBA. If you're into that, that's great. You got the Olympics that's going on in Sochi, but nothing beats just the green field, that brown diamond, stands, and that's the pageantry of the game of baseball. And it's coming back, folks. I mean, it's not MLB The Show. I mean, you guys don't have to play MLB The Show or, basically watch any of these old clips on YouTube or old games. The real thing is coming. And we have so much to do and so much to prepare for the MLB Talk 101. I mean, I'm really excited. I mean, I wish opening day was right now.
Me too. So, you know what? I think that'll be it for tonight. Hope you guys all have a great night. Thanks again to John Flaherty. And for John Flaherty, Gershon Rabinowitz, I'm Brian Danoff. We'll talk to you guys soon.